Over the last 60 or so years, there have been many singles released that could claim the title of the greatest single of all time. However, to me personally, there is only one single that truly shines above the rest, and it's by a little beat group from Liverpool that you may have heard of called the Beatles. The single in question, as you've maybe seen from the title of this video, is Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. Released on the 13th of February 1967, Lennon's Strawberry Fields Forever takes inspiration from his childhood memories of playing in the gardens of the Salvation Army home known as Strawberry Field, whereas McCartney's Penny Lane takes inspiration from the characters and the sights of his upbringing in Liverpool. In this video today, we are going to take a deeper dive into this single and into why I believe that this is the greatest single of all time. The summer of 1966 was a turbulent time for the Beatles. Whilst on tour in the Philippines, they were effectively chased out the country for indirectly snubbing the First Lady.
And our road managers had a lot of trouble trying to get the equipment in because the escalator's been turned off and things. So we got there and we got put into the transit lounge. And then we got pushed around from one corner of the lounge to another, you know.
You treat like ordinary passenger. Ordinary passenger, you were saying. It's an ordinary passenger, he doesn't get kicked, does he?
And then just after they got back from there and they then went on tour in America, they had to deal with the fallout of John Lennon's comments about the band being more popular than Jesus. But on August 5th, 1966, the band released Revolver, which was a complete game changer at the time. No track from Revolver was ever played live by the Beatles due to the technical limitations of the time, and the recordings were becoming just too complicated to be done live. So the band had had enough of touring and they decided that their 1966 tour of America would be their last. Following the concert at Candlestick Park, the band went their separate ways for a 3-month break. George Harrison went to India where, under the watchful eye of Ravi Shankar, he began learning to play the sitar. Ringo decided to spend time with his wife Maureen and their young son Zach. McCartney died in a car crash and was replaced by a lookalike. I'm joking, I'm not a complete idiot. Paul spent the time working with George Martin on the soundtrack for a film called The Family Way. He also went on holiday with Mal Evans to Kenya. Lennon spent the time acting in Richard Lester's film called How I Won the War, and it was on the set of this film where he would begin writing the song that would become Strawberry Fields Forever. The Beatles regrouped at Abbey Road Studios on the 24th of November 1966 to begin work on what would become Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Work initially focused on the song Strawberry Fields Forever, and to date this would be their most complex recording. It would be done over 45 hours spread over 5 weeks. The initial arrangement that the band worked on would be abandoned, and then on the 28th of November 1966 they would regroup to begin recording it a different way. This different way included a Mellotron intro played by Paul McCartney.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to Strawberry Fields.
Initially the band was satisfied with take 7 and they thought that they were done with the song. However, Lennon felt that the song could be done better, so on the 8th and 9th of December 1966 the band returned to Strawberry Fields again, where now they'd be working on the third arrangement they'd attempted for the song, this time much faster and more up-tempo. At this point, after reviewing everything that the band had recorded at this point, John Lennon informed George Martin that he liked both Take 7 and Take 26. Take 7 and Take 26 have both subsequently been released on the 50th anniversary edition of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. You can listen to both these takes individually on that box set, and if you listen to them you'll see that they both sound like Strawberry Fields, but yet they both feel like they're missing something. Anyway, John Lennon asked George Martin, because he liked both takes, if they could be merged together into one take to create the finished thing. However, George Martin had to remind John Lennon that they were both at 2 very different tempos, and John Lennon simply replied with, "You can fix it, George." I'm sorry, that was bloody terrible. Yeah. Now, it's worth pointing out that in this day and age this would be pretty simple to do merge 2 takes, because it'd be done on a computer. So you'd have all these different takes on the computer and you would just press a button, and as Paul would say, the computer would do, and then the thing would be merged together. But this of course was the 60s, it was physical tapes. You had take 7 on one tape, take 26 on the other tape. So how do you do that? I mean, how on earth can you merge 2 physical tapes like that? George Martin and Geoff Emerick had to figure out how to do it. So on December 22nd, 1966, Armed with 2 tape machines, a varied speed controller and a pair of scissors, George Martin and Geoff Emerick had to get to work on the impossible and merging them together like that. To do this, Geoff Emerick came up with a pretty brilliant idea and downright, to be honest, dangerous idea. I mean, I wouldn't do this now, let alone in the 60s with 60s technology. But he decided that in order to get them playing at the same speed, because bear in mind, take 7 was in one machine, take 26 was in the other machine, playing at different speeds, but the machines were pretty basic. You can't easily slow down and speed up machines. But you can if you play with the frequency, the electrical currents going in. So Geoff Emerick started playing around with the plugs, and yeah, he basically fiddled on with the wirings. This is 60s wirings, which is a damn right dangerous thing to do. And he made more of the current going to take 7 in one of the machines to speed it up. There was therefore less current going into take 26 that slowed it down. And it worked. They were playing at roughly the same speed, and probably a massive fire risk. But anyway, once they were playing at the same speed, he then sliced the tape in half, stuck it together, and we had the finished thing. It was a bit more complicated than that. That's a very basic overview of it. Yeah, but that's basically what they did. So yeah, basically, if you listen to the finished version of Strawberry Fields now, the first minute of the song is take 7 and the rest of the song is take 26, so the vast amount of it is take 26. It's just the first chorus and the first verse that is take 7, the rest of it is all take 26. So yeah, that was a pretty amazing thing to do in the 60s. I mean, it's incredible, it's mind-blowing that song, that Strawberry Fields even exists. Good going, lads. Good work. Well, it was Geoff Emerick really that made it work. Brilliant. So, whilst the Beatles were working away on Strawberry Fields, Mr. Paul McCartney was sat there thinking something to himself along the lines of this. Here, John's writing a song about a place in Liverpool where I know. I could do one about a place in Liverpool that I know and he knows too, you know. Alright. Once again, I am very sorry because that was very terrible. And yet, at the same time, I'm not sorry. So yes, as ever, being the competitive pair that they were, Paul wanted to up John and he decided to write a response, and he did Penny Lane, which was a song about his childhood memories of Liverpool. A fun fact, by the way, Penny Lane was originally going to be mentioned in the lyrics of In My Life, but John took it out. Didn't know that until I read it before. On December 29th, 1966, the Beatles regrouped at Abbey Road Studios to begin work on Penny Lane. According to Geoff Emerick, whenever they had downtime, Paul would be sat intently listening to Pet sounds, and with Penny Lane he wanted to get it sounding as close to Pet sounds as he possibly could. Penny Lane is largely a piano-driven song, and it's got 4 different pianos throughout the entire song. However, to record it was a much more straightforward song than Strawberry Fields. There was no playing around with frequencies or anything like that. However, Paul, being the perfectionist that he is, he wasn't fully satisfied with the instrumental break on Penny Lane, so he felt it needed to be filled with something. So, whilst watching a BBC programme, he noticed a guy called David Mason, and he was playing the piccolo trumpet. So he contacted David Mason to ask him to come down to Abbey Road and record a piccolo trumpet solo, which he did. And that's the famous solo in the middle of Penny Lane.
You're the player, how does it make you feel?
Being thoroughly modest, most people came up to me and said it made the record, but I think it did.
I think it did as well, mate.
So yeah, basically that was Penny Lane. It was a much more straightforward song to record, and it was pretty much finished. Didn't take them long at all. Within the high ranks of EMI, trouble was starting to brew. The Beatles had not released anything since August 1966. They hadn't even really been seen by anyone since August 1966. December of 1966 had been the first time since they'd gotten famous, really, where they hadn't released anything. There'd been no new single, no new music. So, they started pressuring Brian Epstein to get something released, or else the public would forget who the Beatles were. So, Brian Epstein went to George Martin to see what they had. And at this point, they only had 3 finished songs: Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, and When I'm 64. Now, at this point, Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields were both destined for Sgt. Pepper. It was where they were intended to be. However, George Martin felt that these were 2 of the greatest pieces of music ever recorded, and they would do very well as a double A-side. So it was decided they'd go out as a double A-side single. Later in his life, George Martin would go on to say that his biggest regret was releasing Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane as a single. He felt they should have been held back and kept for Sgt. Pepper. To promote the single, the band recorded 2 promotional films. This would give the public their first look at the band since August 1966, and many were shocked by their new drastic image. They'd gone from this four-headed mop-top beast to four individuals with their own hairstyles, moustaches, psychedelic clothing, and in Lennon's case, he was now wearing what would become his iconic round glasses. Upon its release in February 1967, many fans and critics were divided by the song. They were confused. It was like nothing they'd ever heard before. It was their first proper taste of psychedelia, and it grew and it grew in popularity. However, it would also be an end point for the band, because every single at this point they'd released since From Me to You in 1963 had gone to number one. They were on about a 4-year streak or something like that. This single never reached number one. Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane stalled at number 2. It was held off by a novelty song called Release Me by Engelbert Humperdinck, which is still funny. I can't not say his name and not laugh. Yeah, so it stalled at number 2, and it was their first single not to make number 1 since From Me to You, which is a shame when it's their best single. Despite not reaching number 1, this single did give a good indication of the direction the Beatles and the wider music industry at this point was heading. The days of writing songs like She Loves You were well and truly behind them. So to me, this single has never been topped. It still sounds like the future to me. It sounds wacky, it's far out, it's dreamy. It's just an all-round brilliant single. Penny Lane is like a quintessentially British song, and it also marks a turning point for the Beatles. Up until this point, they'd sort of been chasing that American ideology, I suppose, in the music industry. You know, Paul has always told the story of She Loves You and how his dad asked him to sing She Loves You, yes, 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 because there was too much Americanisms. Well, Penny Lane stops that. It is quintessentially British. It's like the Beatles have given up on pretending to be American. They want to be their true selves, and that's British music with like the trumpets and the brass and stuff. And Penny Lane perfectly personifies that, and I think it's brilliant. So, for me, I would argue that Penny Lane is probably the more commercial song of the two, but I think Strawberry Fields is the more interesting one. It's definitely the more psychedelic one. It's the one that gives the best taste of psychedelia. Strawberry Fields was also John Lennon's favourite Beatles song, although he would later claim it was a bad recording. I don't know what drugs he was on when he claimed that, because it's a beautiful recording. He did talk some rubbish sometimes. In some ways as well, this single, it is almost like the world is coming out of black and white and it's fully now embracing colour. It's like the black and white post-war Britain is over and it's now this explosion of colour. And that is what this single is. It is an explosion of colour. It's beautiful, man. It's absolutely incredible that in no time at all, really, they've gone from writing a song like Love Me Do to songs like Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane. I mean, how many bands can do that in such a short period of time? Anyone who argues that Lennon and McCartney are not the greatest songwriters of all time, they're idiots, they're daft. I mean, how can you not listen to this song, these two songs, and think, them two, man, what a talent. They are untouchable, and this was them at their absolute peak as songwriters. And what's nice about these songs is I think it's fair to say that both of them did contribute to each other's songs still at this point, which is really nice to hear. It's hard to imagine in 1967 this song going on to Sgt. Pepper as it was originally intended, because where would it go on Pepper? Pepper is one of those albums where it works because of its running length. You can't really change around the running order of Pepper. So where would these songs have gone? We'll never know, because obviously they never got to the point where they decided where they were going. And of course it was policy at the time. Well, it wasn't policy, it was just sort of the way it was, that singles did not go on albums. And yeah, you just can't imagine these songs on Sgt. Pepper, but if they had been on Sgt. Pepper, then it would have elevated that album even higher than what it already is. But then we wouldn't have had this single if it had gone on Pepper. So, you know, swings and roundabouts, really. It must have been absolutely incredible in February 1967 to have gone to the shop, bought this single, come home, put it on and heard it for the first time, the same time everyone else in the world was hearing it. Yeah, like I say, nothing else had ever been released that sounded like this. It was a cultural landmark. It changed the world. Nothing afterwards was ever the same. And I genuinely do not believe that there will ever be a single that is quite like this, that is released, that is as good as this, that is as culturally significant as this single. So to me, that is why Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane will always be the greatest single of all time. Whew. a lot of editing done there. Never done that much editing, I think, for a video, or if I have, it's been a very long time, even though when I'm recording this, I've not actually done the editing yet. But by the time you're watching this, I've done it all, so I'm going to guess there's quite a lot of editing I've done. Anyway, do you agree? Do you not agree? What is the greatest single of all time if it's not this? Because I can't think of anything else where both sides of the single have been this strong and as culturally significant as this. Tell me if I'm missing something, because I'd love to know. But yeah, something I will say as a side note, this thing about how they merged the takes together with Strawberry Fields, it's such a fascinating story. That was just a really brief overview there. So go and research it online, read the full thing, because there's a hell of a lot more to it than what I said there. That's just the overview. And there's a documentary that came out, I think it was for the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper, called Sgt. Pepper's Musical Revolution. It might be on the iPlayer at the minute if you're in the UK. If you're not in the UK, tough. But that's really interesting because that also talks about Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, and that's where I got quite a lot of the information for this video from. So yeah, anyway, I think that's all I have to say for today. So thank you very much for watching. I do genuinely appreciate it. Like I say, a lot of work has gone into this video. If you can believe it, you wouldn't think it, would you? But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very soon on a future video. Take care.